Yasin Ertuğrul, a bottle filled with all the light in one's mind, cast into the waves. Guiding Essays. Lecture Series 1.
Imagine spending your entire life basically building this perfect, completely unsinkable ship. And you're making it out of pure logic.
Right, like the ultimate intellectual vessel.
Exactly. You've used, the finest mathematical measurements, the most rigorous philosophical arguments, and you've sealed the hull with just flawless rationality. You feel completely prepared for your journey, only to arrive at the shore and realize the ocean you actually need to cross is, well, it's made entirely of fire.
Yeah, that realization is basically the intellectual equivalent of a massive earthquake. I mean, every single tool you use to build your ship suddenly becomes this huge liability.
It really does. And that profound, honestly terrifying realization is the core of our deep dive today.
It's a great topic.
Yeah, we are exploring this fascinating text from November 2019, written by Yasin Ertuğrul. It's a blog post, and it's titled Özün Sözü, which roughly translates to the essence of the word. And we're unpacking this for you, the listener, because if you are someone who thrives on clear structures, whether that means relying on strict KPIs at work or just having a really rigid set of personal rules to make sense of the world, you probably also occasionally crave that sort of perspective altering moment, the kind that forces you to rethink your entire framework.
Oh, absolutely. And the author of this text experiences exactly that. I mean, what we are looking at is this massive conceptual collision between two entirely different ways of understanding reality.
Yeah, collision is the right word.
On one side, we have the author's classical academic background, right?
Yeah.
So Aristotelian logic, philosophy, and Kalām, which is Islamic scholastic theology.
Right.
And then on the other side, we have the totally boundary-breaking, mind-bending mysticism of the 13th century poet, Rumi.
Okay, let's unpack this because I want to start by looking at how the author visually sets the stage before we even read a single word of the text.
Oh, the image. Yes.
Yeah. The source material features this really striking image right next to the title. It's a close-up of this intricately carved, traditional wooden door, and there's a brass keyhole, and surrounding it is this stunning, perfectly geometric mother-of-pearl inlay pattern. Just a really classic example of Islamic geometric art.
And honestly, the choice of that image is just a masterclass in symbolism.
How so?
Well, in Islamic art, those complex geometric patterns, they represent the absolute pinnacle of mathematics, logic, and order. Like every single shape perfectly interlocks with the next.
Right, it's very rigid.
Exactly. It stretches out into this theoretical infinity that is entirely predictable and, rational. It is basically the visual representation of the academic mind.
Wow, okay. And the pattern frames a literal keyhole. So the implication there seems to be that the author is taking this highly structured, geometric, academic logic and using it as a key.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to unlock a door into a reality that is completely mystical and boundless.
Which is, it's a beautiful ambition, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But the problem, of course, is that the geometry only exists on the surface of the door.
Right.
Once that door opens, the neat interlocking lines of logic, they just do not apply to the open space on the other side.
They just stop.
Yeah, they stop. And the author quickly discovers that what lies beyond the door actually threatens to consume the very person holding the key.
It's intense. And to really grasp this clash between academic logic and mysticism, we should look at this contradictory puzzle the author encounters right at the start.
The bottle metaphor.
Yes. The text opens with this fascinating, almost tragic metaphor. The author describes their endeavor as preparing, quote, a bottle into which he will fill all the light in his head and throw it into the waves.
Yeah, and that phrase, all the light in his head, that represents his intellect. It's his accumulated academic knowledge, his logical frameworks, his scholastic theology, all of it.
Right.
So bottling that up and throwing it into the waves, it's an acknowledgement of the sheer scale of the chaotic, totally uncontainable ocean of mystical truth that he's trying to approach.
It almost reads like, an admission of defeat before he even begins.
It kind of is.
And we immediately see why he feels so overwhelmed, because he shares the Rumi quote that triggered this whole crisis. And honestly, if you build your life around strict definitions, this quote is going to completely break your brain.
Oh, 100%.
So Rumi says, quote, Who can see me as I am? I have no color, no sign. You will say I have secrets that I know, but I am both those secrets and the one who hides the secrets.
And that right there, that deliberate destruction of binary logic, that's what makes Rumi so incredibly difficult for a classically trained philosopher to process.
Because it just defies all the rules.
Exactly, because in the author's field of Kalam, the entire discipline is built on rational arguments to defend theological principles. It relies heavily on Aristotelian logic.
Right.
And the most fundamental rule there is the law of non-contradiction. A thing cannot be both A and not A at the exact same time.
And Rumi just takes that rule and shatters it.
Totally shatters it.
Because he continues in the quote saying, I don't know when this heart will settle, but right now the one standing perfectly still without moving is me, and the one walking away is also me. I am a sea overflowing within its own existence, boundless, as wide as can be, shoreless, a free sea.
And see, in classical philosophy, if I say I am standing still, that statement relies on a boundary.
Right. It means you're not moving.
Right. It requires a rigid definition that strictly excludes motion. But Rumi, he's speaking from a state of consciousness where those boundaries simply do not exist.
It's a completely different paradigm.
It is. He's describing this ultimate divine unity where all opposites are reconciled. He is literally the ocean overflowing its own existence.
I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of someone whose entire career is based on scholastic theology. Like, how do you even process a statement that refuses to be defined?
Which is tough.
I was thinking, it's like a master cartographer, right? Someone who creates the most precise, accurate maps of coastlines.
Oh, I like that.
Reading Rumi must feel like wading into the ocean and trying to draw a map of the water while you are actively dissolving into it.
That map maker analogy actually captures the dilemma perfectly.
Yeah.
Because think about it, maps require fixed points. You need a really clear distinction between land and water to draw the line.
Right, you need edges.
Exactly. So when the land disappears, the map you've spent your entire life drawing becomes entirely inadequate for the territory you've just entered.
And what's fascinating here is that the text actually describes the author's physical reaction to reading these lines, which is incredibly telling.
Yeah, the physical toll is real.
He writes that he bowed his head over the book, lost in thought, and he literally had to close his eyes just to find the courage to, quote, sail in this sea of meaning.
And closing his eyes, that is a visceral physical manifestation of shutting off the external empirical world. He is turning inward. And for an academic, that is a remarkably vulnerable admission. He realizes that his standard tools, his philosophical arguments, his syllogisms, his geometry, they aren't just unhelpful here. They are actively in the way.
Wow, yeah. So he is desperately searching for the courage to navigate this shoreless sea. But instead of finding like a comforting set of instructions, he is met with an even more terrifying realization from Rumi.
Yeah, it gets worse before it gets better.
Right. This is where the conceptual clash reaches its absolute peak.
Because he turns back to Rumi's poetry, basically seeking a guide on how to build a vessel to actually survive this ocean.
And he finds this pivotal quote that serves as his answer. And it says, "O heart, love is crossing a sea of fire in a boat of wax. You cannot cross without burning to ashes."
The sea of fire in a boat of wax. It is honestly one of the most enduring and striking metaphors in all of mystical literature.
So what does this all mean for our author? I want to break down the mechanics of that metaphor, especially for someone steeped in logic.
Sure, let's do it.
If we view classical logic and Kalam as a boat, right? Like a framework designed to keep you safe and dry while you navigate complex ideas. Rumi is suggesting that this vessel is actually made of wax. And wax is useful. It holds its shape at room temperature. You can mold it. You can seal things with it. It works perfectly fine in normal conditions.
Right. When you are operating in the day-to-day world, making business decisions, debating ethics, organizing society, a wax boat might look and function exactly like a sturdy vessel.
Yeah.
But Rumi is talking about love with a capital L. This is the mystical pursuit of divine truth, which he equates to a sea of fire.
And the implication there is that the very nature of the environment changes everything. If you try to sail a wax boat on a sea of fire, it's not just that you might, spring a leak or get thrown off course.
No, it's total destruction.
Exactly. The vehicle you are using to travel is entirely consumed by the destination.
And that destruction of the rigid self, like the surrender of strict logic and the academic ego, it's a prerequisite for crossing. The text explicitly says you cannot cross without burning to ashes.
Right.
Rumi is basically telling the academic mind that its intellect can only carry it to the shore. To actually cross the sea, the intellect must be allowed to burn.
Which is wild. I mean, if my entire life's work was building that wax boat and someone tells me it's going to melt the second I leave the shore, my instinct would be to just turn around.
Oh, absolutely.
I would pack up my geometry tools, go back to my solid foundation of philosophy, and just never look at the ocean again.
Because for anyone who relies heavily on logic and structure, it is an existential threat. It threatens to invalidate the very way they make sense of reality.
But the author does something really surprising here. You'd expect a scholar of Kalām to either reject Rumi's paradoxes as, illogical nonsense, or swing to the other extreme, completely abandoning their academic discipline to become some wandering mystic.
Right.
But the author does neither. He actually leans in, and it leads to a truly fascinating synthesis of these two opposing worlds.
Yeah, the text highlights this profound shift in the author's internal state. Because upon accepting the terrifying reality of the wax boat, he is actually filled with an intense joy.
Joy.
Yeah, the Turkish word used in the source is has, which carries a weight of a deep, almost spiritual delight or intense pleasure.
Wow, it sounds like the joy of surrender almost, because he writes that he devoured the entire Mesnevi, which is Rumi's massive, multi-volume poetic masterwork, in a single week.
Which is insane. I mean, reading the Mesnevi in a week is a monumental intellectual and emotional undertaking. It consists of tens of thousands of lines of dense allegorical poetry.
Yeah, he notes that the peace it left in his inner world was so profound that he still hears it, and it literally makes him stare off into the distance. It completely shifted his worldview. He even began researching the great historical figures who shaped Anatolia, just struck with awe. But here's where it gets really interesting regarding the mechanics of his reaction. He doesn't throw away his academic tools.
No, he doesn't. He realizes the tools just need to be recontextualized.
Exactly. He takes his rigorous fields, Kalām, philosophy, and logic, and he decides to use them to analyze these mystical poems.
Right.
The source material notes he launched the blog, which he links to a visual design project on Behance, and he frames this whole effort as a debt of loyalty to those great historical figures.
Yeah.
He is essentially setting up a highly structured academic workshop right on the shores of this sea of fire.
And that approach introduces a pretty significant paradox of its own, doesn't it? Because we have to ask how someone practically uses the tools of strict logic to analyze a text that explicitly tells them logic must melt.
Right. I'm honestly struggling to see how those combine without destroying one another. If logic relies on strict boundaries and mysticism actively destroys those boundaries, it sounds like trying to mix oil and water.
Yeah, or, given our metaphor, trying to use a wax boat to bottle a sea of fire.
Exactly. Does the author find a way to emulsify them?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the key to that synthesis actually lies in the author's foundational principle.
Yeah.
It's stated clearly toward the end of the text.
What does he say?
He writes, quote, "All books are for understanding the Quran and therefore Allah." This ultimate goal acts as his anchor, It allows him to reconcile the geometry of the intellect with the empty space of mysticism.
Okay, just to clarify, when he says all books, he doesn't just mean, like, literal bound pages, right? He's referring to disciplines of knowledge.
Correct, yeah. In the author's view, Kalām, philosophy, and logic are books. They are disciplines constructed by human rationality.
Got it.
And Rumi's Mesnevi is also a book, but it's a discipline of the mystical heart. Historically, these have often been viewed as opposing forces, right? The structured mind versus the boundless soul.
But if the ultimate goal of all knowledge is to understand the divine, then both the logic and the fire serve the exact same overarching purpose. They're basically just different phases of the same journey.
Exactly. Logic has a specific jurisdiction. It is incredibly useful for building the foundation. It provides the rigorous discipline required to even begin asking the right questions.
Right, like you need a starting point.
Yeah, you need Islam and philosophy to understand the structure of the observable world, to map out human ethics, and just to formulate coherent thoughts.
So logic brings you to the shore. It allows you to build the wax boat in the first place.
Yes, but you have to be willing to let that structure melt when you encounter the divine reality that supersedes it. The author is attempting a deeply humble harmony here. He commits to using his logical mind to study Rumi, hoping it will contribute even a, quote, single atom to understanding the creator properly.
So he is using his intellect to map the exact coordinates of where the intellect failed.
Basically, yeah.
That's amazing. He's taking the wax boat out as far as it will go, fully prepared for the moment it catches fire, because the fire itself is the destination.
And finding immense peace in that inevitable destruction That is a radical shift for an academic. By dedicating his blog and his philosophical writings to this pursuit, he's actively practicing the principle that his logic is secondary to the mystical experience of truth.
It really is a stunning intellectual journey to trace. I mean, we start with that opening metaphor, the anxiety of trying to bottle up all the light in your head and throw it into the waves.
Right.
And we end with an author standing on the shore, watching his wax boat burn, feeling nothing but profound joy and peace.
And this journey completely redefines our standard approach to learning. We are so heavily conditioned to believe that learning is just about accumulation.
Yeah, like gathering more facts.
Exactly. We add more runes to our mental house, more facts to our databases, more categories to our worldviews.
But this deep dive into Yassine Tousroul's reflections suggests that sometimes the most profound learning doesn't come from building a stronger structure.
No, not at all.
It comes from encountering something so vast and so undeniably true that you just have no choice but to let your carefully constructed frameworks melt away.
Yeah, Rumi's shoreless sea simply cannot be contained in the author's bottle of light. And once the author accepts that limitation, the anxiety of trying to contain the uncontainable just evaporates.
Well, for you listening right now, we've covered a lot of philosophical ground today. We explored the paradox of the map maker trying to chart an ocean while dissolving into it.
We unpacked the terrifying realization of setting sail on a sea of fire in a boat made of wax.
And we arrived at a deeply human synthesis where rigid logic and boundless mysticism aren't enemies at all. They are just different tools, one made of structured geometry, one made of burning ashes, and both of them are pointing toward the same ultimate truth.
And the core takeaway here is that our intellectual frameworks are vital vehicles for navigating the world, but they are not the ultimate reality. Every vehicle eventually reaches the end of its road, or, in this case, the edge of its sea.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this exploration, we want to leave you with a thought to carry into your own work, your studies, and just your daily life, because you as a learner rely on frameworks to make sense of your world.
Right. So in your own pursuit of knowledge, whether it relates to your career strategies, your personal beliefs, or even just how you define success, what is a wax boat like? A rigid framework, a long-held assumption, or a logical structure that you're currently clinging to? And what magnificent, terrifying sea of fire might you discover if you finally allowed it to melt?